The overnight upheaval in Syria shows just how tense the world is at the moment. And those times, folks, bottom line, require competent leaders and competent diplomats. But if Donald Trump has his way, a former Fox News host will be leading the Department of Defense, and someone who is supposedly an Assad apologist will be overseeing national intelligence. Joining us to discuss is Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell of California. It's good to have you back at the table. Look, let's start right up front with Ambassador John Bolton's assessment of Tulsi Gabbard, who has been proposed as our next Director of National Intelligence.
Yeah, I think she's totally unqualified to be a DNI, and I think her positions put her beyond the outermost fringe of American politics. When she visited Assad in Syria, he was effectively a Russian-Iranian ally. And what she said about Syria not being a direct threat to the United States, that was her justification for going, it's completely false. And it's going to be very interesting to see what the files that may be uncovered in the Syrian government, if the rebels succeed in capturing Damascus, what they show about a number of Americans.
So now it's real, right? Real events in Syria on the ground, obvious relationships that Tulsi had prior to this moment. How do you see this changing how the members, Senate, I know it's not your responsibility in the House, but, you know, Capitol Hill is Capitol Hill. How does this change the way folks look at her potentially as the next DNI?
They're going to wonder who's going to be looking out for America's interests in that region. She was completely wrong about Assad. He killed at least 500,000 people. He's gone like a coward. He left the country, and Russia is losing there at least until January 20, when their preferred guy comes back into power here. But I think when you step back, you know, the real question is going to be, you know, where does Donald Trump put his focus? And there's a parallel to what happened in October 7, where Benjamin Netanyahu comes into power. He's got corruption charges within. He's focusing on his political enemies. He's moving the IDF to the West Bank to protect the settlers there who are expanding. And he's taken his eye off the ball, off his greatest threat, which is in Gaza, and misses intel warnings. Donald Trump comes into power, and he's going to focus so inwardly on going after his political enemies, going after hardworking, undocumented immigrants who he wants to get caught up in this national roundup rather than just focusing on the violent individuals. What does it mean to us if he takes his eye off the ball when you have a mess going on in this part of the world and you have people over there who are not our friends, with China and Russia also regrouping and getting stronger? Does he make us weaker by doing this? So it's really going to be a question of where does Donald Trump focus, and does he have the attention span to look at all of these threats in the world and not just go after who he sees as personal enemies to him?
Congressman, you are, of course, a member of the Homeland Security Committee. Have you received, are you scheduled to receive a classified briefing on what is unfolding in Syria? And if you are, which questions do you have going into that briefing?
So we expect that on Monday when we are back. My questions, of course, are going to be, what is Russia's presence now in Syria with Assad gone? Are they holding back and waiting for Donald Trump to come back into power so that he can help them in Ukraine and then put them back in a resource position where they can make Syria a bigger mess? Look, from just a humanitarian standpoint, I just want the people of Syria not to live under a brutal dictator. That doesn't mean we have to put U.S. troops there. It just means we have to care and have policies that reflect that. One other point, though, Israel was not incredibly helpful when it came to Ukraine. You have a Jewish president of Ukraine in Zelensky, a very historic figure in how he bravely has defended democracy there. And I was often being told by Israel leaders that because of Russia's presence in Syria, that limited what they can do. So I wonder if this changes Israel's ability to help a democratic country like Ukraine as they need to beat back Russia now more than ever.
The other aspect of this, I mean, you mentioned Donald Trump and how he will look at this, whether he's just going to stay more fixed on the personal as opposed to the more expansive part of the responsibilities of being president. He said in a response to the Syrian news on Truth Social, quote, in any event, Syria is a mess, but it is not our friend, and the United States should have nothing to do with it. This is not our fight. Let it play out. Do not get involved. This isolationist ideology that has reemerged within the Republican Party stands in exact opposite of where Reagan looked at the world and saw the Russians for who they were and what they were, and realized the Americans had a role to play. President-elect Trump is basically saying, let the Russians handle this in the Middle East. Let them figure it out. Oh, and the Chinese, if you're available, you can help too. How do members on the Intelligence Committee, Senate and House, on Foreign Affairs, Senate and House, look at this? Do you suspect that there's going to be a complete abdication of any involvement by the United States government in what happens next in this region?
That's what Donald Trump is telegraphing. And it's concerning because his focus and his muscle is going to be turned inward. Now, I have received the message, and I agree with the American people, that the primary resources of the United States need to be spent here. We need security at the border. Absolutely, we need security at our own border. Once you get that, you can address the workforce crisis issues with immigration. People want to see their costs come down. They want to know, what are we doing to increase their pathways to better jobs so they can dream bigger, do better. That has to be our focus. But that doesn't mean we are not engaging in this region and understanding where threats could emerge. But I just fear that this guy, who's got his long enemies list and is putting in unqualified people to come in and carry out, that enemies list for him, will take his eye off the ball internationally and leave countries who don't like us and terrorist groups that don't like us in a better position to hit us or take advantage of us. And that's not leadership.
Congressman, I want to loop back to Michael's first question on Gabbard, because in addition to what we heard from Bolton, you also have 100 former national security officials who say they are alarmed at the prospect of her leading the intel community. Quote, several of Ms. Gabbard's past actions call into question her ability to deliver unbiased intelligence briefings to the president, Congress, and to the entire national security apparatus. Following her trip to Syria, for example, Ms. Gabbard aligned herself with Russian and Syrian officials. There is Gabbard, there is Hegseth. I just want to push a little bit. Do you think that what we are watching unfold does change the calculus for some Republicans in the Senate who might not have wanted to have this fight?
Yes. Now, the trick here is you can't put it on just one. When you put it on just one person, they shrink. And the beauty of Gaetz not being the nominee is that no one can say who the senator was that took out Gaetz. And so they need to find a way to collectively come together to take down these nominees. By the way, I thought it was so interesting, Michael, that Pete Hegseth, the man who said no woman should ever go into combat, sent his poor mom into combat to try and save his butt. And I feel bad for her.
But she did have thoughts about him, too, before So when your mama tell you you're not much of a man, that puts you in a very interesting position. So,
Congressman Eric Swalwell, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Pleasure.